All right, so welcome back to the deep dive where we take a bunch of information and try to pull out the important bits, right? And this time, we're not starting from scratch. This deep dive, it picks up right where we left off with you last time.
Yeah, exactly. Last time we went deep on the Jamaican agricultural market.
Yeah.
Looked at everything up to like March 19th, 2025, if I remember right.
Uh-huh.
And we saw that overall prices were kind of inching upwards, just a little bit, like 0.94%. But the wild thing was how much things were jumping around. Volatility, they call it.
Right.
The whole 38.35%. We were looking at, 58 different commodities, and the average price was somewhere around $666.98 per kilogram.
Okay, so this time around, we're zeroing in on the week ending March 26, 2025.
Okay.
Now, at first glance, it looks like things dipped a bit, like 0.16% down overall. But, averages can be deceiving, right? There's always more to the story. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to dig into the details of how those individual prices actually moved.
Absolutely, and to really get the full picture, it's super important to remember what happened the week before.
Right.
Because those price swings can have a ripple effect. Like, remember Gungo Peas?
Oh, yeah.
They shot up a crazy 62.73%, ended up at, $1,410 a kilogram.
Yeah.
That was huge. Probably some kind of sudden demand surge or maybe a shortage, especially when you see how much the price jumped in Kingston and St. Andrew, over 104%. Something that big, it doesn't just happen out of nowhere.
No, for sure. And there were a few other things we were keeping an eye on from last week, too. Remember, scallion, green cabbage, and sweet yam. They all dipped in price. 12.52%, 10.91%, and 10.6%, respectively. We were thinking maybe, if demand picked back up, those could be good buying opportunities. So keep those in mind as we look at what happened this week.
Okay, so let's move on to this week's big winners. The commodities that really saw prices take off. And at the top of that list is ginger. Pretty impressive jump there, 30.78%, bringing it up to $1,325 a kilogram. And it seems like St. Anne was really where the action was on that one.
Yeah, a 30% jump, that's not messing around. You mentioned how versatile ginger is, and I think that's got to be a big part of it. It's in everything, cooking, even wellness stuff these days. So that demand from both sides could explain why the price is climbing. What about St. Anne specifically? Any thoughts on why it was so concentrated there?
Yeah, that's an interesting detail, right? Could be a few things. Maybe the weather was perfect for growing ginger in St. Anne right then. Or they've got a really good system for getting it from farms to markets so they can quickly respond to that demand. Or maybe it's just that people in St. Anne really love their ginger. Whatever the reason, it shows how local factors can have a big impact on prices, which is something you definitely want to keep in mind if you're thinking about sourcing from specific areas.
Makes sense. So what else was moving up in price this week?
Okra had a pretty good run too, up 28.46%, hitting $750 a kilogram. Hanover and Clarendon were the key spots for that one.
Okra. Yeah, it's another one that gets used everywhere, both here and I bet you for export too. Almost 30%. That tells me there's a lot of demand right now, especially in Hanover and Clarendon. If you're a farmer there and you're harvesting okra right now, well, you're probably smiling all the way to the bank.
You got that right. When you time your harvest just right to match that high demand, that's when you can really maximize what you're making. Whether it's people eating more okra here, or there's a big export opportunity, or maybe it's just that other places aren't growing as much right now. Whatever the reason, it's a good sign for okra producers in those regions. If you're thinking about getting into production or maybe working on the supply chain, it might be worth taking a closer look at what's happening with okra in Hanover and Clarendon.
Good point. Okay, so was there one more commodity that saw a big price jump?
Oh yeah, and this one's pretty interesting. Yellow sweet pepper. But not just any yellow peppers, the ones grown in greenhouses. They saw a big jump, 24.22%, ended up at a pretty premium price, $1,475 a kilogram.
Wow. Now that's a serious price difference compared to regular yellow peppers. Remember, we saw those go up a little bit last week. But these greenhouse ones are in a whole other league. It really shows you the value of, controlled environment agriculture. Looks like the farmers who invested in greenhouse tech are reaping the rewards. What is it about growing them in a greenhouse that makes them so much more valuable?
It's not just about being in a controlled environment, although that helps. You see, greenhouse yellow peppers, they tend to be better quality. More uniform, nice shape, not so many blemishes, and you can grow them for longer even when it's not the right season for field-grown peppers. Plus, the yields are more predictable and you don't have to worry as much about diseases. So, for buyers, especially those fancy restaurants or export markets that are really picky about consistency, greenhouse peppers are a safer bet. It's a really interesting option for farmers who want to stand out and get into those higher paying markets.
Okay, so we've seen the winners. Now let's flip the script and look at the commodities that saw prices drop in the week ending March 26th.
Yeah, let's do it. And topping the list of decliners, we have red sweet peppers.
Yeah.
Took a pretty significant hit, down 22.14% to $950 a kilogram. Quite a turnaround, especially since they were actually up 11.75% the week before.
Wow, up one week, down the next. That really shows how volatile things are. What do you think caused such a dramatic swing? Is it all about supply?
Yeah, seeing that big drop in red sweet peppers right after they went up, it really points to a sudden surge in how much is available. Maybe a bunch of farmers in the main growing areas all harvested at the same time, creating a glut. That's how supply and demand works, and it's a good reminder of how important timing is for producers. If you're in the business of buying or selling these peppers, understanding these short-term shifts in supply can be really valuable.
Makes sense. What else saw a big price drop?
Irish potatoes are next on the list. They went down 18.69%, landing at $240 a kilogram.
Irish potatoes, those are a staple here. A drop of almost 19%, that's got to be significant.
Yeah.
Do you think it's got something to do with harvesting seasons, or maybe people just weren't buying as many potatoes that week?
Well, since Irish potatoes are such a basic food, that big drop probably means there's either way more potatoes available than usual, maybe because the harvest went really well in a lot of places, or it could be that demand just dipped for a little bit. But there's such a staple, it's unlikely to be a long-term trend. We expect people to start buying more again soon. So if prices stay low, it might be a good time to buy and store some, betting that prices will go back up. Of course, you got to factor in storage costs and how long they'll last, but it's something to consider. This could be an opportunity for anyone involved in processing or storage, taking advantage of those lower prices.
Yeah, playing the long game. All right, what's the last commodity on our list of decliners this week?
Last but not least, we've got sorrel. It went down 14.29%, finishing the week at $375 a kilogram.
Sorrel, yeah, that's usually tied to certain times of the year, right? Like around the holidays. So a price drop of over 14% makes sense if we're past that peak demand season? Is that probably what's happening here?
Most likely, yeah. People drink a lot of sorrel during holidays and celebrations, but once those are over, demand naturally goes down. And when that happens, prices usually follow as the supply catches.
So it's all about what's hot and what's not right now, rather than some fundamental shortage or oversupply.
Exactly. And the third takeaway is that prices are really different depending on where you are. Remember how strong those price increases were in St. Anne, Hanover, and Clarendon? But in Kingston and St. Andrew, things were pretty stable. The report says that's because Kingston and St. Andrew doesn't grow that much of its own produce, so it relies more on what comes in from other areas. This regional variation is really important to keep in mind. Understanding those price differences between parishes can be a game changer if you're trying to figure out where to source produce or if you're thinking about entering different markets.
Right, so location, location, location. All right, so let's put it all together. What are some strategic actions or things to think about based on what we've learned from this week's data and the trends from the previous week?
Let's start with those commodities that were on the upswing this week, ginger and okra. They both had big price jumps, so if you're a farmer, it might be worth looking into scaling up production. And if you're a distributor or processor, maybe think about locking in some reliable supply contracts. Those sustained increases tell us there's a good amount of demand for these products.
Makes sense. If you see something consistently going up, it's worth figuring out how to ride that wave.
Yeah.
Now, peppers, those seem a bit more complicated, right?
Yeah, the peppers are an interesting case. Red sweet peppers went down sharply after going up the week before, while those greenhouse yellow sweet peppers shot up in price. Shows you that the market treats different varieties differently. It could be about what color people prefer, or maybe the quality and shelf life of those greenhouse peppers is seen as better, or perhaps the export demand is different. If you're a pepper farmer, it might be smart to diversify what you're growing. Maybe have a mix of field-grown and greenhouse peppers so you can cater to different buyers and spread out your risk a little.
Diversification, that seems like a good takeaway here. Now, how about those Irish potatoes? Remember, they had a big price drop.
Yeah, with that much of a drop, and considering they're a staple food, it might be a good idea to keep a close eye on those Irish potato prices. If they keep going down, it could be a smart move to buy and store some, hoping that demand and prices will rebound later on. Of course, you got to weigh that against storage costs and how long you can keep them before they go bad.
Right, got to think about the long game. And, with all this volatility we've been seeing, it really highlights how important it is to be flexible with your pricing and inventory, don't you think?
Absolutely. When the market's bouncing around this much, you got to be able to adjust your prices quickly and manage your stock effectively. That's how you stay profitable and grab those short-term opportunities.
And thinking back to last week, that crazy 62% jump in Gungo Peas really shows you how quickly things can change and how much money you can make when there's a sudden surge in demand. Makes you wonder if those big increases we're seeing now with ginger and okra could be the start of something similar. Definitely something to keep an eye on over the next few weeks.
That's a really good point. While that gungo pea jump was extraordinary, these big price increases in ginger and okra could be a sign that something bigger is happening. If they keep going up in the coming weeks, we might be looking at another big trend. It just goes to show you got to pay attention to those early signals and not just look at weekly changes in isolation.
And one last thing, remember those commodities that were down in price last week? Scallion, cabbage, sweet yam. We were curious if they might be bouncing back this week. Even if they're not at the top of the list of gainers, does the fact that they're not among the biggest losers tell us anything?
Yeah, that's sharp thinking. We don't see those three mentioned as big gainers this week, but they're not among the biggest losers either. That could mean their prices have stabilized. Whatever caused them to drop last week might have run its course. Maybe they're leveling off or even creeping back up a bit. It's not enough to make headlines. We'll need more data to be sure, but the fact that they're not plummeting anymore could be a good early sign.
So, wrapping up our deep dive this week, it's clear that the Jamaican agricultural market is still full of surprises. Lots of opportunity, but you got to be ready for anything.
No doubt about it. We're seeing all these price changes, and to really make good decisions in this market, you need to understand why things are happening. Is it demand shifting? Supply changing? Are there regional factors at play? It's all connected.
So, here's something to chew on. We saw ginger, okra, and those fancy greenhouse yellow peppers go up in price, while red peppers and Irish potatoes went down. What do you think this tells us about how people's tastes are changing, or how farmers are adapting? What bigger, long-term shifts might these trends be pointing to? That's something to think about as you plan for the future. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
All right, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Take care.